Good evening, everybody. Welcome to ODI. Thank you for braving the weather. I'm new to London, and I have been fooled into believing that the weather is only good here because it has been tremendous. But thank you for coming out tonight, and welcome to ODI. My name is Alex Thier, and I'm the executive director here. But I also want to welcome you not only to ODI, but to the world stage, because today London is hosting a remarkable event, the second Family Planning Summit following up from the Planning Summit in 2012, in which the world got together and made some pretty remarkable commitments. And so today's event, which is bringing together world leaders like those who are with us tonight, is not only an important check-in moment to see whether those commitments have in fact been fulfilled, and I think we'll hear more about that tonight, but also to propose new ambition and to respond to changes. There have actually been a few changes. I don't know if any of you have been paying attention to them since the last summit, but it is a different world since 2012. I thought it was remarkable to listen to Melinda Gates, for example. She talked about how in 2012 they were a little bit afraid. They were afraid about whether people would show up. They were afraid about whether people would make the commitments. They were afraid about whether those commitments would be delivered and have the impact that was promised. And she began this discussion last night by saying, now we are not afraid because we have seen real delivery. We have seen real commitments, and we have seen real progress even in this short time. But at the same time, I think a lot of people acknowledged that things have changed since 2012, not entirely all in positive ways. Last time around, the United States government was a global leader in pushing forward these commitments, and that deep support has not only evaporated, but in some ways has turned to animosity towards many of the issues that were on the agenda today. And as a result of that, many of those, I think, who said that they were not afraid have stepped up and into the breach. Stepped into the breach both with their resources and their rhetorical commitment to this fundamental issue of family planning. And that's what brings us here tonight, because we have seen some big commitments and bold statements, not only today, but in the last few months. I heard Priti Patel, the Secretary of State here for Development, say today that if girls own their bodies, they own their future. I think that that is strong rhetoric. But what we have heard also comes from those tonight. And so I am delighted to be having with us Marie-Claude Bibeau, who is the Minister of Development and La Francophonie for Canada, and Zeinab Ahmed, who is the Minister of State for Budget and National Planning in Nigeria. And we're going to hear perspectives from a key leading donor who in fact have launched tonight, launched previously, but talking about tonight, a critical new development policy for Canada that is a feminist approach to international development. A bold statement that not only says what does development have to do for women and girls, but in fact, I think in many ways flipping the question on its head and saying with women and girls at the center of the potential for development progress, and in fact, what will define whether we can meet the Sustainable Development Goals. And that policy actually also came with commitment. I'm sure you'll talk more about that. But they are, as we say in the United States, putting their money where their mouth is and actually making commitments not only broadly to women and girls, but to adolescents. I just wanted to say that for this summit, ODI, which has been doing a lot of research on women and girls, and particularly adolescents, has a new report out for the summit on adolescents. And it shows some remarkable and disturbing things. It shows some incredible progress in some places for women and girls when girls are given the opportunity to learn and to have access to family planning. Adolescent pregnancy drops way down. But at the same time, we know that levels of violence towards women and girls, teen pregnancy, those things that stand in the way of women achieving their objectives remain fundamental challenges for many countries. If you want to join the conversation, you can send in questions for those who are watching live. You can also tweet. We're using her voice, her choice, which is there, right there. So please join the conversation and provoke us to have an interesting one, which is what I will try to do. So what we are going to do tonight is that we're going to have two speeches. We're going to watch a brief video first, and then I'm going to introduce the minister. And then after that, we will have a response from Minister Zeinab. So as we say, roll tape. So to talk about that vision, I'm proud to welcome to ODI Minister Bibeau, who's appointed by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in October of 2015. Before entering politics, Minister Bibeau did actually, in fact, work for the agency formerly known as CIDA, the Canadian International Development Agency, with postings in Morocco and Benin, and then became a successful businesswoman. So you know of which you speak from all levels of engagement and society. I want to again congratulate you on launching this new policy, and welcome.
Thank you for that kind introduction. Merci pour votre invitation et pour cette occasion unique de vous présenter la nouvelle politique féministe d'aide internationale du Canada. And you all worry why I speak French. I'm a proud Canadian. I have to speak French a little. So it's wonderful to see so many of you here in this room, and to know others are listening in from around the world. We are all partners in this challenging endeavor. And if we are to end poverty in the least amount of time possible, if we are to meet the SDGs, and if we are to empower women and girls as they should be, evidence and knowledge sharing must be an integral part of our decisions and policies. Of course, not all governments hold this view. But in Canada, we have experienced what happens when decisions are made for political or ideological reasons and not driven by evidence. Since I became as the Minister of International Development a year and a half ago, it has been clear to me that gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls must be at the center of everything we do, to tackle the root causes of poverty, especially if we want to see lasting solutions to persistent development challenges. And that doesn't just matter to me. It matters to Prime Minister Trudeau, who is a strong feminist. So what do we mean by that? Canada recognizes that only by pursuing gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls will the world be able to achieve all of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. It cuts across all areas of development. Following extensive consultations with thousands of stakeholders over the last year, last month, I delivered on my mandate to refocus international assistance on the poorest and most vulnerable, as well as on fragile states. Canada's Feminist International Assistance Policy is designed to align with Agenda 2030 and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals in a collective effort to end poverty and leave no one behind. It explicitly recognizes that if we cannot hope to accomplish this ambitious agenda, if half of the world's population is not included in decisions, in power, in opportunities, and it is to everyone's advantage to amplify the voices of women and girls, because we know that when women and girls can choose their own futures and contribute fully to their communities, everyone benefits. When women are educated, they are empowered. Their lives change. They tend to marry later, have fewer children, provide better health and nutrition for their families, and earn more income than women who didn't have the advantage of schooling. And we know that when legal and social barriers that discriminate against women are eliminated, remarkable changes happen. Women have access to capital. They start businesses, get decent jobs, and they invest their profits in their families and communities. Though this understanding is not new in development, applying it effectively and systematically across all of our work will take determination and persistence to accomplish this fundamental shift. As it stands, more than 150 countries have laws that actively discriminate against women. More than 15 million girls are married before they turn 18. And 225 million women don't have access to the contraceptive method of their choice. As a result, more than 22 million women and adolescent girls have unsafe abortions every year. And let's not forget that 1 in every 3 women experiences physical or sexual violence. Canada continues to address the needs of women and girls in fragile and conflict-affected states, particularly through the implementation of the UN Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace, and security. Canada has taken concrete actions in improving the health and rights of women and children by supporting the full range of sexual and reproductive health services. Canada recognizes that women and girls are powerful agents of change, development, and peace. In fact, we are counting on their track record of transforming their families, communities, and economies. Of course, sound public policy needs to be there as a foundation for change. I believe that in this area where I believe that this is an area where Canada can make a difference. Canada's role in the world has historically been that of a global convener in areas such as peacekeeping, human rights, and climate change. My colleague, Chrystia Freeland, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, recently laid out Canada's foreign policy priorities. First among them was the need to support a rules-based international order and all its institutions, and to find ways to strengthen and improve them. She said that Canada is now being called by virtue of our unique experience, expertise, geography, diversity, and values to play a pivotal role in creating an order for a new century. And Canada's new Feminist International Assistance Policy is a big piece of that commitment. We were also well aware that people in Canada and our partners around the world look to Canada for leadership, sound policy, and support. It can't just be about public money, though. Canada's international assistance envelope will exceed $5 billion in 2017-2018. On a global scale, official development assistance represents $140 billion annually. But there are limits to how much it can grow. To achieve the SDGs by 2030 will require $5 to $7 trillion. And while increasing government's contribution is essential, we also need to seek out new partners and new investors. We need to be more innovative. We may even need to take a few risks, backed up by sound monitoring and evaluation. And finally, we must use our financial contributions to leverage additional investments. Recently, Canada allocated $300 million to the newly established Canadian Development Finance Institution in Montreal as a concrete avenue for leveraging investments in developing countries in areas like green energy and sustainable agriculture, empowering women and youth-led businesses. Returning to Canada's Feminist International Assistance Policy for a moment, 3 core elements emerged from our extensive consultation process: human dignity, the empowerment of women and girls, and building local capacities. We concluded that empowering women and girls can achieve all 3, and it is the best way to reduce poverty and create a more inclusive, peaceful, and prosperous world. From now on, gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls will be integrated in all our programs, including humanitarian support. That's why I am here in London for the Family Planning Conference. En mars dernier, j'ai annoncé 650 millions de dollars pour appuyer les droits et l'accès des femmes et des filles à toute la gamme des services en matière de santé sexuelle et reproductive. Cet engagement illustre le leadership du Canada envers l'égalité des genres et le renforcement du pouvoir des femmes et des filles. Les projets que nous appuierons vont répondre à la violence sexuelle et fondée sur le genre, incluant la lutte contre les mariages forcés, les mariages d'enfants, ainsi que les mutilations génitales féminines. This morning, I announced that $241.5 million of the $650 million commitment will be directed towards 19 initiatives focused on sexual and reproductive health and rights. And 65% of that amount will go to Africa. In fact, I come to you straight from a trip to DRC and Ghana, and just before that, South Sudan. I feel that if we are to make progress for women, it is crucial that Canada re-engage in Africa. That is one of the reasons why Canada is dedicating 50% of our bilateral international development assistance to sub-Saharan Africa within the next 5 years, with an emphasis on women and youth. And that work has already started. In Ghana, for example, we are helping farmers to thrive as the whole country becomes less dependent on food imports through our programs. We know that women make up the majority of agricultural workers in sub-Saharan Africa. So, investing in this sector makes a major difference in their lives, their control over resources, and their access to economic opportunities. When we recently helped women soybean farmers in the Upper West region, their yields increased by 380%. Ghana is just an example. More broadly, across the world, we will base our programming on 6 areas of action. The first, and our core area, is gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls. When we started to work on this priority, we began by looking at the numbers. Historical analysis of Canadian aid spending in this area revealed that less than 3% of Canadian investment were actually targeting gender equality and women's rights as their primary objective. This was not consistent with our ambitions to do better and our commitment to a feminist approach. Going forward, Canada will devote no less than 15% of its bilateral international development assistance to initiatives that directly target gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls. On top of this, we will increase our attention to integrating gender equality across all of our work. In the past, some 30 to 50% of our investments were completely gender blind. This is also changing, so that by 2022, 95% of all programming will contribute to robust gender equality outcomes. That includes a new $150 million program over 5 years dedicated to promoting women's rights and advancing women's leadership and gender equality through local women's organizations. The second focus is human dignity, through the effective delivery of social services, including health and education for poor and vulnerable populations, especially those coping with armed conflict and natural disasters, or lack of access to essential services. Emergency humanitarian assistance, as well as development projects, can help to bring often overlooked sexual, reproductive, and psychosocial healthcare, as well as potable water, nutritious food, and quality education to these people. The third area is growth that works for everyone. Canada will support women and girls so that they can develop their skills and gain access to economic opportunities, decision-making, and leadership, for example, through technical and vocational training and entrepreneurship. We will also promote social inclusion, the right to work, the right to own property, and access to financing for women. Fourth, Canada is committed to helping the most vulnerable countries adapt to climate change, mitigate impact, make the transition to low-carbon emissions, and improve water management. We will help women improve crop resilience, access water and natural resources, and participate in decision-making on environmental matters. The fifth area of action is inclusive governance. We believe that democracy, responsible governance, peaceful pluralism, and human rights are crucial to peace and development. As we learned during our consultations with more than 15,000 stakeholders in 65 countries, civil society are the ones who hold governments to account. That is why we will help women participate more fully in political life, strengthen women's power and access to justice, and create an environment that helps them participate in civil society. The sixth and final area is peace and security. Canada is committed to reducing threats and helping stabilize fragile states and those affected by armed conflict. We want to see women lead in peace building as leaders and beneficiaries, as they have successfully done in places like Colombia. We're not only insisting that our partners deliver on gender equality, we are going to walk the talk in our own approval processes. From now on, if they are to get Canadian funding, our partners will need to consult women locally, involve them in decisions, and make sure they are being empowered throughout the project implementation. Our intention is to be more flexible and to invest our resources where Canada can have the biggest impact in reducing poverty and inequalities. We will be working on improving our processes and funding mechanisms to make them more innovative and better adapt to needs on the ground. And we will need to keep learning from collaboration with our partners to reflect lessons learned in how we do things. Think tanks have an important role to play in contributing to the evidence-based and holding governments to account. The expertise and experience of organizations like yours can help speed up the transition to gender equality. Think tanks like ODI can help to build global networks and keep the conversation going with what you are discovering through your approach to implementing the SDGs and tracking development progress. I will be looking to you for new and innovative ways to advance development. I know you have already given some thought to how Canada can deliver results in the global development context. And we have much to learn from you about what works with women and girls, innovative financing, and lessons learned in emerging and fragile states. In fact, we have already been using your expertise to find ways to improve humanitarian policy and practice in response to conflict and natural disasters, and to be more innovative in the humanitarian landscape. And now, I look forward to hear from my colleague. Thank you.
Thank you for the wonderful remarks and that compelling invitation. I'm sure there's people racing back to their computers now. We're also really honored to have with us from Nigeria, Minister Zeinab Ahmed, who's the Minister of State for Budget and National Planning. She is here representing Nigeria as part of this summit, and she has a fascinating background dealing with some tricky issues. She was the national coordinator of Nigeria's Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative, which is a tremendous and I imagine somewhat challenging adventure, but that's not what we're here to talk about tonight. She's also served with distinction in many senior positions in the Nigerian government and outside. She was the CFO of Nigeria Mobile Communications and the managing director of the Kaduna Investment Company. So has had some real interesting on-the-ground experience across the spectrum in trying to really make things work for her people, for her government. So welcome to ODI. Please welcome to make some remarks and comments on the minister's speech. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alex, for that introduction. Let me also congratulate ODI for the work that you continue to do. The last time that I was here in June last year, it was an invitation of the Natural Resource Governance Institute, and we're talking, of course, about the extractive industries. And again, Marie-Claude Bibeau, congratulations for this breakthrough policy that the Canadian government has just launched. We are very excited about it. And I asked myself, why the choice of Nigeria to be here today? And I guess the answer could be that in Africa, Nigeria is the most populous country, and that Nigeria is currently growing at a population rate that could see us becoming the third largest population in the world by the year 2050. We have a population growth that currently exceeds the economic growth. So it's a very serious challenge, but we also see it as an opportunity. Nigeria also has one of the most serious humanitarian crises currently in the world. The Boko Haram insurgency has been raging on for about 7 to 8 years now, and we have a lot of people in very fragile conditions. And as you will imagine, the majority of the people that are affected are women and children. So this, for us, is a very timely policy, and we take it as a very important one. We have also a situation where because we have been a country that has been dependent on revenues from oil and gas, with the decline of commodity prices, we saw our country slipping into recession. So we have insurgency raging in one part of our country. We have crisis in the Niger Delta region, the oil region where major revenue is. We have dwindling revenue and very huge demand for economic development. So when we came in 2 years ago, we decided to take stock, and in taking stock, we evolved an economic recovery and growth plan, which was designed to pull our nation out of recession, but also to return the country out of onto the path of sustainable growth. While we were doing this plan, we decided that growth that we seek to attain must be an inclusive growth, that we must grow and bring everybody along. And we must make sure that the growth encompasses youth as well as women. We determined that there was no way our growth can be sustained if we're not bringing women into productive enterprise and enabling the women to be empowered and be more productive. We decided that the best thing to do was to take advantage of the large population that we have. We have a very large population of youths, very active youths. About 30% of our population today, of the 188 million people, are youths between the age of 10 to 20. That is, we have a very large dependency rate of youths over the number of people working. It's a significant challenge, but it's also an opportunity. So we have to educate these youths. We have to educate the women. We have to create awareness that women must have the choice to decide what happens in their lives, including whether or not they adopt family planning, including whether or not they decide to have children now or later and with who. And this is important for us because we have found that the more you educate girls and women, the better families they're able to bring up and the more productive they become to the society. In trying to address the problem, the acting president of Nigeria just a week ago launched a roadmap to attaining the dividends of the demography that we have. And we have designed programs to enable the youths acquire new skills that will make them productive, to enable women go into productive activities so that they become more useful, not only to themselves and the family, but also to the society, because the women are important. They are more than 50% of the population, and they are not contributing much currently to the growth of the country. So if we're able to harness these numbers, equip the women with finance, with trade, with awareness and education, and they become productive, our country will grow, and the growth will be a sustainable growth. We have a society that is largely conservative. There's Islam in the north, and there's also a lot of Christianity and Catholicism. And because of that, there is a need for us to evolve ways and means to communicate effectively through champions, through leaders, religious leaders and traditional rulers, to educate the women, the girls, and even the men to understand that we must control our families. A situation whereby we have an average of 5.4 births to one woman is just too high, and for us is not sustainable. So it's not about educating women alone, it's also educating the men, because we have situations whereby a man can marry more than one wife. And so when you restrict the numbers to the women alone without educating the men, the growth will not be, the improvement will not be realized as quickly as we had hoped. Honourable Minister, it seems as if this new policy was designed specifically for Nigeria, because the priorities that you mentioned are the priorities that we seek to attain. We have identified the need to bring about gender balance in everything that we do. and also to give special attention to women, to education of girls and to children. We also have determined that while we have a lot of people in very fragile state because of the insurgency, and we seek to provide the basic human needs for them and to even resettle them back into their communities, that we must do that with dignity because they are our people. And we must make sure that whatever we provide for them, whether it is food or drugs or water and sanitation, that we give them the assistance that they need and make sure that we maintain their dignity and respect. That in growing the economy, we must educate everyone and leave no one behind. And to do that, the Buhari administration made a conscious effort in 2016 and developed one of the most robust social intervention programs, which has been rolled out last year and is continuing this year. The social investment program had a very large provision of the budget of 6,500 billion was dedicated for the social intervention program, and this is provided to create jobs for the youths, to provide financing for women so that they can engage in different types of chosen enterprises. We also had a provision to provide meals to our primary school children so that children's retention in school will increase so that they can have better nutrition. And also we insisted that the food that the children will eat must be food that is grown in Nigeria. So that created a lot of trade and commerce for women because the women were cooking the food and the women were the ones selling the foods in the market, and then largely the women were farming the food as well. We had the government enterprise program, which is giving women small loans to be able to get them to get engaged in a business of their choice. This is a program that we've started and we've sustained it and we're growing it as the time goes along. And also we have seen the need to continue to become more open and more transparent. We're trying to encourage the citizens to participate in governance, especially in the budget-making process. We have a need to not only restore peace in the northeastern part of our country, but to go into discussions about reconciliation, and women have been identified as the ones that must lead if the peace talks are going to be stable and sustained. We have deployed a significant level of psychosocial support to help the children, the women that have been traumatized through the process of the insurgence. So you see, this was really designed for Nigeria. We are excited about this. We hope you will choose to work with us, and we are ready to work with the Canadian government. We also hope that ODI also will work with us because we want to be able to use data that is credible, and data not just about our country but other countries that have similar situation to Nigeria, to learn from the experiences of other countries that have had similar situations. The program that we have been attending, the summit, was very valuable because we saw examples of how Bangladesh and Malawi and Pakistan that have had problems that the type that we are having now, how they have turned around and have actually progressed significantly. We hope ODI also will work with us, just as we hope that, Honorable Minister, that you will allot a significant proportion of the 50% that is meant for sub-Saharan Africa to Nigeria. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So this is great. We've got a little time for conversation. I'm going to ask you guys a couple of follow-up questions. Quick responses are good because then we've got an audience who also will, I'm sure, have a lot of questions. Let me start with a tricky one for you. no free lunch or reception or whatever we're offering. There's a reason we're having this conversation in 2017, because the issues that we have identified, that this summit is about, that your policy identifies, are not easy issues. They are deeply culturally embedded questions that provoke controversy, that deal with long-standing traditional practices. And so it's not just a question, although the money is necessary, certainly not sufficient. I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about your theory of change, how the investments that you want to make in women and girls you think are going to lead to the sort of societal changes that are going to make it so that we're not having this conversation in 10, 20, or 30 years.
Well, I think we have to always keep in mind the main objective, and which is the one of the SDGs, so ending poverty. This is ultimately what we want. And having been through this very important consultation in 65 countries, we came to the conclusion, evidence-based conclusion, that the best way to have an impact on the development and to have a sustainable impact is really to empower women and girls. I could speak so long, but you said short answers. But I mean, we're convinced that no country can afford to leave half of its population behind. So we really have to make sure that we reach gender equality. And it has been proven if by 20, well, we have analysis are there to say that if we were to achieve gender equality by 2025, it would mean $12 trillion additional to our global GNI. Translation sometimes. So this is really the ultimate objective, is to end poverty. So we have to end inequalities. So we have to empower women and girls.
And so let me ask you a specific question. I'll ask you something similar. Let's take the issue of child marriage, right? Child marriage is a leading cause, obviously, adolescent pregnancy, of women and girls not completing their schooling and education, not getting into the workforce, all of the things that we think are going to be necessary to achieve the objectives that you've outlined. I think the figure coming from UNFPA in our report is 15 million girls worldwide. Maybe boys and girls in teen marriage, so somebody can correct me if that's wrong, somebody who knows better than I do. So this is not just let's come up with a clever program, because these are challenging, customary practices, tough to get out of. How do you think Canadian assistance will be able to tackle an issue like that specifically?
I think first we have to have the conversation with the different countries, the leaders, and also the traditional and the religious leaders in the field. And I was in Ghana a couple of days ago, and I was so pleased to see that in the community we visited, the school was supported by Right to Play, and the students has prepared a drama, to present in front of their community, and maybe there was 500 person, mothers, fathers, and traditional leaders also. So they were allowed by the traditional leaders to talk about menstrual hygiene. And I've been told that they have been doing this exercise, talking about early marriage, talking about gender-based violence. So we have to have this conversation. This is the first step. And to see that in many countries, the government is including it in its priority and its development plan, that it's important to reach gender equality. And so it's very important to have it at the high level, but we have to work with the grassroots also. And this is why we have announced, we have saved $150 million over 5 years to work with local women's organizations, because we know that we have to work really with the grassroots, with the women organization, because they know their priorities, they know their challenges, they know their community and how to address, to have these conversations and to progress. And I had conversation with some traditional leaders and with some chief imam in particular, and he was telling me, I asked him, okay, tell me, how do you address the subject? Because it was, and the group of Catholic and Muslim leaders were together to change this cultural way of having early marriage, because they were together, these leaders together, they wanted to stop early marriage because they believed that that girls should be educated and should be empowered. So it's so good to hear from local leaders that they are with us in this, and they appreciate our support. So we have to be respectful in the way we do it, and I think the most respectful way is to accompany local groups and not try to. So it's interesting to see how, I would say, Canadian media address the issue, because they focus a lot on contraception and on abortion, but we shouldn't focus on what is one mean. And we have to keep the objective in mind is to end poverty, and then we have to end the inequality.
Thanks. Mr. Ahmed, going from the global to the local, one of the challenges that Nigeria has that you articulated well is not only the size of the birth rate overall, but particularly challenges with young girls getting married, having children. What has worked, or what do you think is needed for Nigeria to tackle that specific problem?
Well, what we need is, like Mr. Bibeau has said, is to engage the people at the community level. We need to use traditional rulers, religious leaders, women leaders to educate the women. And the education is around the benefits that would accrue for the women being engaged in spacing their family. The benefit is the women will become more healthy. The children that they will have will be healthier because they're more evenly spaced. They will have more income. They will have more time to be able to engage in productive activities before the next pregnancy. And they will have more income to spend on the children because the children will now be less. We must use the religious leaders because the religion, I am a Muslim. Islam does not say you cannot do family planning. Islam actually encourages parents to space their children, to give time for the mother to heal properly before she has the next child. But our culture gets mixed up and is mistaken for the religion. The religion does not encourage early marriage. To the extent that a girl is not matured or developed enough. The religion does not encourage that. It's a culture and a tradition. So we must engage the religious leaders, we must engage the traditional rulers and women leaders at the community level to educate the women and the girls as to the harm that this practice is invoking not only on them and the benefit that will accrue to them as individuals, to their families, to the community, and to the larger society.
You mentioned in your remarks, and I don't want to pretend to be an expert on the origins or motivations behind Boko Haram, but suffice it to say there is now a world-famous problem in northern Nigeria or from a group that is almost specifically responding negatively to what we're talking about tonight, a negative backlash towards education, and particularly education for girls, and the kidnapping and these terrible things that have gone on. Clearly, what you are speaking of is a future that needs to address that challenge in your own society. So do you think that your work and what you have committed to here is going to provoke further backlash or help you overcome it?
No, it's going to make a significant difference because in the northeastern part of Nigeria, the statistics is that the girls are very disadvantaged in terms of education. So it is not too long ago that more and more girls are being educated. The root cause of Boko Haram is underdevelopment, is not education, is underdevelopment. And we are trying now to make sure that development is brought to the Northeast. After humanitarian assistance, the next thing we're addressing is to bring about development. No sane human being that is gainfully employed, that has a stable family, will risk their lives and go and become a criminal, which is what the Boko Haram insurgents are.
Thanks. Let me take this back to you, Minister Bibeau. Canada, like every country, spends its resources in its national interest. And Canada, through the announcement of this policy has clearly determined that this is part of its national interest. Can you talk a little bit about why a feminist development policy is actually in the Canadian national interest? Not just for the good that it can do in other places, but why is it good for Canada?
Well, I think as Canadian, it's part of our values to support and to help the poorest and the most vulnerable. But you're right, there are interests which are, let's start with global health, for example. When we invest in the health sector of any developing countries, because we've invested a lot to end polio, HIV/AIDS, TB, malaria, for example. When we invest to end these diseases, we help the countries to strengthen their health system. So when we have like Ebola, when the Ebola crisis arrived, these countries who have been supported for the other diseases were better organized and ready to face a new crisis, and it helps globally to avoid the dissemination or the propagation of Ebola, the spread of Ebola in a more intense or more globally. So it's one example in terms of global health. We do have a benefit in helping in improving the health sector, health department in developing countries. In Africa, you talked about the demographic explosion and so many young people, and I believe that these young adolescent boys and girls, they want to have hope. They want to, have a chance to be educated, to have a job, to earn a living, and to contribute to their country. But if there's no hope because of underdevelopment, what do they have left? They might turn to an armed group because it's the only opportunity they have to earn a revenue. Or they may just grow the flux of refugees, which is not what we want, and it's not what they want either. They want to build their country. This is what they want. So it becomes a matter of peace and security. So we have to support them in developing their economy, supporting the education system, supporting creating jobs over there to help peace and security in the region, because peace and security becomes a global issue if it grows. And this support to economic growth for peace and security is also new opportunities for any other market. So it's a growing market in Africa, and we have many businesses who would like to do business in Africa. So creating safe space to do business is also good for us.
Thanks. Mr. Ahmed, Nigeria is one of the largest recipients of U.S. foreign assistance. There have been major proposed cuts announced to that assistance. So I have a two-part question for you. The one is, how concerned are you about the support that Nigeria gets from the United States and that could go away? And then the second part of the question is that as you talk to Minister Bibeau and others who are supporting Nigeria, what is it that you most need? The needs are large. Nigeria also has a large and growing economy, maybe not growing as quickly as you'd like, probably not taxed as effectively as you would like. But donor money is not going to solve Nigeria's problems. It can help. What is it that you most need from the donors, and how concerned are you about potential cuts from U.S. assistance?
Let me just say, what we need most from the donors is partnership. We're not putting our hands out to come to us, because we do have resources in the country, and we're trying to mobilize domestic resources. We have a situation where in the past we have not taken advantage of the resources that we have, and the most important resource that we have in our country is actually the people. We have a very large population. We have people that are very entrepreneurial. We have a lot of natural resources, the most important one being agricultural potentials in the country. The most important resource for us is not oil, it's not gas. We have arable lands, we can grow literally everything, and we've started. We've come to a point where now where we're growing rice, and largely before we were importing rice. Rice is the major food that we eat in the country. We've started exporting some food items so we can earn foreign exchange from agriculture. We're also developing the mining sector, and it is growing, and more is being produced locally and being consumed locally. We're concerned about the reduction in development aid from assistance, but we don't think it's going to break the camel's back because we have other partners, and we have also stepped up the efforts in collecting taxes internally. We're not increasing taxes, but we're working a lot to expand the tax base and also to give incentives for people who were not paying taxes before to pay back taxes. So there are different sources of revenues that we have identified and that we are growing systematically. We hope to be able to grow to the point when development assistance is a complement, not something we depend on.
Yeah. That's good. Maybe Canada should think about investing in female tax inspectors for Nigeria. Just trying to.
Good governance.
Yeah.